This week, I'm going to go over a standard Florida real estate contract so that when you're ready to make an offer on a home, you know exactly what you're signing. If you're new here, my name's Alexandra and I'm a local realtor down on Florida's Space Coast. I have people calling me every day and I absolutely love it. So if you have any questions about Florida real estate, go ahead and give me a call, shoot me a text message, or send me an email. I've got your answers and I would love to chat with you. And if you want to keep seeing videos like this, go ahead and like this video, subscribe to my channel, and don't forget to ring that notification bell so that you're notified every time I post a new video. I know contracts can be pretty boring and this subject matter is pretty dry, so I'm gonna try and go through it quickly and go over the basics. I'm not going to dive into all of the specific little situations that can occur because that would make this video literally hours long. So I'm going over this contract as if you were going through the most common standard real estate transaction. If I happen to gloss over anything that you have questions about, feel free to reach out to me and I can answer those. Also, make sure to read your contract from the beginning to the end. You should never sign something without reading it first and making sure that you understand. All right, let's get into it. This is the as-is residential contract for sale and purchase. It's one of the more common contracts used when making an offer on a home, but it's not the only one. So if you've made an offer on a home and your contract looks a little bit different, it doesn't mean it's wrong. Your realtor just used a different type of contract. This is the one that I most often use. The first part of the contract is probably the most self-explanatory part. Here you've got the seller's names listed and you, the buyer's name, listed. And then you have the property description, which is going to include the address, the tax ID number, and the legal description. On section 1D, this lists out all of the personal property that comes with the home. You'll see here, things are listed like smoke detectors, the refrigerator, dishwasher, garbage disposal, ceiling fans, and other items like that. But you'll notice what is not listed are the washer and dryer. So if you want the washing machine and the dryer, make sure to let your realtor know so that he or she can write that into the contract. And that would go on the line right below section 1D. If any items are excluded from the purchase, for example, if the seller loves their dining room chandelier and it has some sentimental value, they may want to take that with them. That will be made known to you in advance, hopefully, and that will be written into section 1E. Number 2 here is where we're getting into the numbers. You've got your purchase price and some closing details. The first part of number 2 is where you'll list what you're offering for the home. And just below that, that's where you're going to list the earnest money deposit that you're offering to make. Typically, this is about 1 or 2% of the home purchase price. Now, this earnest money deposit can accompany your offer, or more commonly, you can deliver your earnest money deposit to the escrow company within 3 days of an accepted offer. It doesn't have to be 3 days though. That's what the contract defaults to, but you can put any number you want here. Just below that is the escrow agent's name. So this is going to be the law firm or the title company that will be holding the escrow deposit. Now, most often, the seller selects the closing company and pays for the charges that go along with that. So this company that you're delivering your escrow deposit to most likely will be the company closing your transaction. But if you don't like this company and you feel really strongly about using another company, you can offer to pay the fees that are associated with being able to choose the company yourself and choose the company yourself. Of course, the sellers have to agree with it, but that's what an offer is. You're making requests and they can either accept or reject them. All of these lines here will display what amount of the purchase price you're going to be financing and any other deposits that you'll be making. On line 2E, you'll see your balance to close. Keep in mind, this does not include your closing costs. You'll want to ask your lender what your closing costs are going to be because they're not listed on the offer. Section 3 here is where you put the date and time during which the seller has to accept your offer, otherwise your offer is no longer valid. This section also explains when the effective date of the contract is, depending on when it's signed and when it's been delivered to all parties. Number 4 here, this is where you put the closing date that you're requesting. Number 5 here explains 2 scenarios where you will be allowed to extend your closing date. Number 6 basically states that upon closing on the property, the seller has to give you possession of the property with no tenants inside, unless 6B is checked. This section also states that the seller has to give you all keys, garage door openers, and anything like that to access the property if it exists, and all of their personal belongings and garbage should be removed. Number 7 covers the assignability of the contract. More often than not, you're going to see the box checked that says that the buyer may not assign this contract. Now we're moving on to financing. Number 8 is all about the type of financing you're using. Section 8B is a financing contingency. This means that if for some reason you're not able to get financing, that you can back out of the contract and get your earnest money deposit back. So this is a contingency that needs to be satisfied during the transaction. If it's a cash transaction, 8A will be checked, and then you can kind of move on to the next part of the contract. This portion also covers the time during which you, the buyer, has to submit your application for financing. The standard is about 5 days. The rest of number 8 here just outlines what you are required to do as a buyer. It basically just means that you are required to continue to get your financing, and if anything happens along the way where you may not be able to get financing or something comes up, that your realtor needs to keep the other side's realtor informed so that everybody's on the same page and nobody's blindsided all of a sudden if something happens. Number 9, A and B list out the closing costs that are going to be paid by the seller and by you, the buyer. But it doesn't give a monetary amount, so like I said before, you'll want to speak with your mortgage lender. 9C covers title evidence and insurance. This portion covers basically that if you are financing, that a title insurance commitment issued by a Florida licensed title insurer is required 15 days prior to a closing date. Now, if this is a cash transaction, then it only needs to be done at least 5 days before closing. All right, this is what I was talking about before. Now, you can see that there are 2 boxes. One says that the seller shall designate the closing agent and pay for owner's policy and charges. And then the next one says the buyer shall designate closing agent and pay for owner's policy and charges. More often than not, the seller will be selecting the closing company, so the first box will be checked. But if for some reason you'd like to select that, let your realtor know and they can check the second box and you can determine which company you'd like to close you. I work here in Brevard County and I do not service Miami, so I'm skipping over this portion that is specific to the Miami-Dade area. 9D covers the survey. At least 5 days prior to closing, you may, at your own expense, have the property surveyed. Your lender may require a survey, and typically the title company or the law firm that's handling your closing will order the survey for you. But they'll ask you about it and let you know what the costs are in advance. If you're requesting a home warranty right out of the gates, 9E is where that goes. 9F here covers special assessments. Typically, you will want the seller to pay off in full all assessments before closing. So you'll probably see that box checked. But in some cases, it would be appropriate for the seller to pay in installments and then you take over those payments once you own the property. If you have questions about this, ask your realtor in regards to the specific property that you're purchasing, and he or she will be able to explain it to you. Number 10 is all about disclosures. This portion of the contract covers radon gas, permits disclosure, mold, flood zones, an energy brochure that your realtor is required to share with you. So make sure that if you haven't gotten an energy brochure, that your realtor has sent it to you. It also discusses lead-based paint. So if you're buying a home that was built before 1978, you may have a lead-based paint disclosure to sign. This portion also covers homeowners associations. So if there is a homeowners association, you will have another disclosure that you'll have to sign that discloses the amount that you have to pay and that there's an HOA. It also covers property tax disclosures, Foreign Investment in Real Property Tax Act, we call that FIRPTA. You don't need to worry about this unless you are not a US citizen. If you're not a US citizen, this could pertain to you. Otherwise, you can just move on to the next portion. And finally, this also covers the seller disclosure, which will be given to you in a separate document. The seller's disclosure is just a property disclosure that the sellers fill out disclosing any potential defects with the property. Number 11 covers property maintenance, meaning after you make your offer, the seller is obligated to continue taking care of the property. Next, number 12 covers inspections. This is where you'll request the number of days that you'd like to have for inspections. My buyers typically request anywhere from 7 to 15 days for inspections, but like I said previously, every real estate transaction is unique, so you might need less or more days. You'll definitely want to rely on your realtor for guidance. 12B covers your right to walk through one more time at the end of your contract period to check and make sure that all repairs were made, that the home is in the same order that it was in when you made your offer, and that everything looks good. As we scroll down and continue on through the contract, you'll see that number 13 outlines everything that is expected of your escrow agent. This is the person that's holding your earnest money deposit. Number 14 here sets an expectation of who is responsible for issues and inspections within the property, and that is not your realtor or the realtor's brokerage. Both you, the buyer, and the seller are obligated to do your own research to verify the property's condition and any other facts or representations of the property. Your realtor and the realtor's brokerage do not reside on the property, so you have to rely on the information that is given to you by your home inspectors that you've hired and the seller and their property disclosure. Most of page 7 on this contract goes over what happens if you, the buyer, defaults or the seller defaults. It also covers if any sort of legal situation arises, what should happen. Number 18 goes over all of the standards that are required for real estate transactions. I'm going to go over some of the more important ones, but I highly recommend reading through all of this. I'd like to point out here number 18G, which covers force majeure. This covers your protections if you go under contract and then a hurricane comes through and destroys the home or some part of the home, for example. This portion tells you everything that would happen in that sort of situation. 18M here covers a risk of loss. So if there's any sort of fire or other casualty loss on the property, for example, this portion outlines how you're protected if that happens. Here on number 19, you're going to see a bunch of check boxes. Now, you'll see these checked off if there are any additional portions of the contract. For example, if you're buying a home in a community that has a homeowners association, you will have a homeowners association rider. If you are purchasing a home with FHA or VA financing, you'll have a rider for that. Number 20 is where any additional terms are going to go. So if you're requesting, for example, a $5,000 credit to go towards your closing costs and prepaids, that's where you'd request that here. Next, you'll see a little checkbox that says seller counters buyer's offer. Now, more often than not, you're not going to receive this back with that little box checked. Typically, your realtor and the other realtor will discuss, and once a meeting of minds occurs, a new contract will be written up and all parties will sign. And finally, at the bottom here, this is where you, the buyer, will sign, the sellers will sign, and the name of your realtor and the seller's realtor will be on here as well so that you have those for your records. Make sure that you read this contract from the beginning to the end. You never want to sign something without reading it and fully understanding it. If you found this video helpful, go ahead and hit that subscribe button for me. Thanks for watching. Bye!